You can take us on that journey. You can follow him on his Substack, underthrow.org. His latest book, Underthrow, How Jefferson's Dangerous Idea Will Spark a New Revolution. He is tasty and smart. Max Borders.
Hello there, thank you for coming. So we have some folks that like money, however it is dwindling in its value. We can, maybe you can get it and burn it up tomorrow. But the idea here is that the republic is dead. We want to try to fix it some way. Now, we've got 25,000 reasons for you to sit up and pay attention, so I'm glad you're here. First, I want to say I have tremendous respect for the U.S. Constitution, the one we currently have, and I'm sure all of you do as well. And that's not really the issue exactly, as you'll see. Now, remember that back in the debates of 1788-89, the Anti-Federalists lost the debate. They lost the debate. And in the Constitutional Convention, a constitution was born, and later the Bill of Rights were added. But the problem is, the Anti-Federalists are now winning the debate. So, there was this guy, Robert Yates. He was a founder that basically no one had ever heard of. And he said, in Brutus I, which was his pseudonym, the U.S. is too large to be centrally governed, as evidenced by historical failures in the Roman Empire. He said, look back at the Roman Empire. It's too big. And look, he was only talking about a couple million people. We now have maybe 7 million people. We have now, what, 333 million, something like that? The Necessary and Proper Clause and taxation powers grant Congress excessive authority, which endangers state sovereignty and individual rights. Well, that's certainly something we care about, and it seems to be something that he was absolutely right about in his predictions. Standing armies will become a tool of oppression, so he favored regulated militias. We now have tremendous standing armies, and they stand all over the world. The Constitution, he said, will erode state sovereignty, hindering states from safeguarding citizens' interests. And Yates walked out of the Constitutional Convention because he saw all this coming. He was prescient. Now, Jefferson's hanging out in France, doing his thing, and in correspondence says, an elective despotism was not the government we fought for, but one which the powers of government should be checked and restrained by the others. Is the FBI being checked and restrained? Not very well. Is the executive being checked and restrained? Is Congress being checked and restrained in its corruption? Jefferson worried all manner of government actions would be aided by a little sophistry on the words general welfare. And boy, was he ever right. So I submit to you that the Republic is dead, or at least it's moribund, okay? And if what you achieve through this exercise is the revival of the Republic and the Constitution on which it stands, wonderful. Otherwise, we need to get creative, and we need to get creative fast. America has become a corporatist empire. U.S. debt is 130% of GDP, and our unfunded liabilities are staggering, as big as the output of the global economy in terms of GDP. 800 plus U.S. military bases around the world have no coherent foreign policy anymore. The Federal Reserve is unaccountable, and the U.S. exports its inflation. And of course, we have it here at home as well. Too many people are dependent on government welfare and various other goodies, and that includes corporations who belly up to the trough. Corruption is thus running rampant, and increasingly authoritarians at home run roughshod over amendments. 1, 4, 9, 10, 14, acting with impunity. The Second Amendment is in danger. Other amendments are in danger. The Constitution is frayed at the edges. Now, when we were kids, we were told that monopolies are a bad thing. They create barriers to entry that make it nearly impossible for new entrants to compete. They set prices far above what one would expect in competition. Change the price and quantity of a good or service alone, sometimes arbitrarily. Offer poor quality products or customer service. Ever been to the DMV? They've improved at the margins in some states, but basically we have the DMV-ification of everything the federal government touches. And at least there are 50 DMVs to compete. Monopolies offer few substitutes or alternatives, or none. The problem with this monopoly great corporation I call GovCorp, is backed by an extortion racket. So acts with impunity. So what about democracy? What about our vaunted democracy? You know what the powerful are trying to protect from you. Imagine one morning you were to wake up and pick up your smartphone and find this. 2 apps. The red app and the blue app. What would you think about your smartphone? That something bad had happened, that had been corrupted, that had been hacked? Certainly not something that you would have bought or chosen. This is the Democratic Operating System, or DOS. And we need to upgrade DOS. So, what we have now is kind of this call it a spectacle to control the monopoly on violence. And that's pretty much what politics boils down to. It is an illusion of your participation. You cry your teardrop into the ocean every election cycle, every 2 to 4 years. You expect then that the tide will turn with that teardrop, and guess what? It never does. Instead of DOS then, the 2 apps, the red and the blue, what if we could upgrade and get something a little more like this? And to mix metaphors, it wouldn't be a great tug of war over who gets to run the OS. Instead, the OS would facilitate this level of governance diversity. Which means we need a new revolution. A new revolution. Not one of violent overthrow, but rather of underthrow. And I'll come back to that concept in a moment. No, what we need is a constitution of consent, of decentralization, of accountability, of justice, of self-determination, individual sovereignty, and human respect baked into its auspices. The one we have does not manage to protect our sovereignty, and our leaders surely do not respect us. They censor us, sometimes imprison us, and generally make our lives hell. They tax us, and on top of all that, they have tremendous debt. We are swimming in a sea of red ink. So we need a new object of reverence. We have an object of reverence in the Constitution, but something is wrong. It's not working. This new object of reverence should provide a moral political vision that inspires people again, facilitates pluralism, but also unifies people, will be open source such that others can fork the code. Why do we need a constitution that that is so difficult to change? I actually dispute the idea that constitutions shouldn't be easily changed, not necessarily through amendment, although that is also true, but also through forking and jurisdiction hopping. This new object of reverence can be global, but not globalist. It should not instantiate or give rise to massive global bodies that dominate us or oppress, but rather facilitate competition, new jurisdictions, and competitions between and among them, such that we can choose our own governance structures and systems. Create a society in the cloud first before being instantiated in various places on terra firma. And this is the idea of the network state. This is Balaji Srinivasan, of whom you may have heard. He's been on the podcast circuit as a really interesting guy. And the idea of the network state is something that we've shared for a long time, although I've never met Balaji. Find a common moral political basis. That means values that we all share. Form a community in the cloud, that is the digital cloud. Acquire terra firma properties worldwide. Connect this archipelago of properties and its adherents into a network of shared values. So we're going to have to hang out while we wait for the Leviathan structures around the world to collapse under their own weight, whether that weight is of debt or oppression.